A woman in a nightgown walks through a dark hallway. The image is grainy, the colors bleed into one another, and somewhere outside the frame, masked intruders are waiting. You grip the controller, ready to save her. If you want to uncover why games like this once promised to put you inside the movie, subscribe to Cartridge Graveyard. But when the moment arrives, you do not know what the game wants. Left? Right? A button? You guess, the screen cuts away, and she is gone. For a few strange years, this was supposed to be the future of video games. Not simulated worlds, not responsive characters, real actors, real sets, and entire movies controlled from your sofa. Companies spent millions chasing that dream. Politicians dragged it before Congress, and electronics giants built expensive machines around it. But the interactive movie did not collapse simply because the acting was awkward or the video looked terrible. Its real failure was hidden inside the promise itself. One forgotten game would expose that flaw, become a national scandal, and still survive long enough to influence games decades later. The dream began before compact discs ever entered a console. In 1983, arcades were dominated by blocky sprites, electronic sound effects, and machines that looked visibly artificial. But Dragon's Lair looked like a Disney film. Former Disney animator Don Bluth created hand-drawn scenes stored on a laserdisc, so players could guide the knight Dirk the Daring through a castle filled with traps, monsters, and one very dramatic princess. The cabinet was instantly recognizable. Crowds gathered around it because nothing else moved like this. But the trick was more fragile than it appeared. Players were not freely controlling Dirk. They were choosing the correct input at specific moments, almost like entering a secret code while a cartoon played. Miss the cue, and Dirk was crushed, burned, eaten, electrocuted, or transformed into a skeleton. That harsh design was perfect for an arcade. Failure was funny. The machine collected another coin, and the next player stepped forward. Dragon's Lair reportedly cost roughly 50 cents per attempt, when many games still charge 25, but people paid because the visual spectacle felt impossible. So the lesson seemed obvious. If video games could look like movies, movies could become video games. But arcade success concealed a problem. Dragon's Lair worked because it was a 2-minute public performance surrounded by flashing lights and spectators. At home, without a crowd and without the novelty, memorizing button prompts could feel less like controlling a hero and more like operating a stubborn DVD menu. That warning was ignored because a new piece of technology had arrived. The CD-ROM. A typical game cartridge held only a few megabytes, but a compact disc could store around 650 megabytes. To publishers, that empty space looked like an invitation. Developers could suddenly record actors, dialogue, music, and long stretches of video. The game industry did not merely see more storage, it saw Hollywood. One of the earliest and strangest attempts began with a console called Control Vision, also known internally as Nemo. The machine was designed to use VHS tapes containing multiple video tracks. Players would make choices, so the system could jump between recorded scenes. Hasbro invested millions into the project, and a team led by Rob Fulop produced a game about teenage girls being watched inside a suburban house. The footage was filmed in 1987 with Dana Plato, known for Different Strokes. But the console was cancelled before release, so the tapes were packed away. 8S. That forgotten game would return as Night Trap, and when it did, it would become more famous than the hardware it was built to sell. But the scandal surrounding Night Trap was not the event that killed FMV gaming. The greatest damage came from somewhere much quieter. The moment customers took these games home and tried to play them. By the early 1990s, console manufacturers were racing to attach CD drives to the future. Sega released the Sega CD in North America in 1992 at a launch price of about $299. It connected to the existing Genesis, giving Sega access to disk storage without replacing its successful console. The system received games such as Sewer Shark, Ground Zero, Texas, and Night Trap, each promising the experience of entering a live-action film. But the Sega CD had to push video through hardware designed for colorful 2D games. A single-speed CD drive transferred data at roughly 150 kilobytes per second. So full-screen, high-quality video was impossible. Developers compressed footage aggressively, reduced the frame rate, limited the color palette, and often placed the action inside a small window surrounded by interface graphics. On the box, players saw actors running through detailed sets. On the television, they saw a postage stamp made of moving mud. Still, those limitations created a peculiar charm. Sewer Shark shouted orders through a claustrophobic cockpit. Ground Zero. Texas turned alien detection into a frantic surveillance job. Night Trap asked players to switch between 8 security cameras and trigger traps before intruders captured the women inside the house. The footage never waited. Look at the wrong room for 5 seconds, and an event disappeared forever. That created urgency, but it also made the player's attention the real enemy. The game could show only one room while demanding knowledge of everything happening elsewhere. 8. Success required repetition, memorization, and information the player often had no fair way to obtain. So developers faced an escalating design trap. Make the cue obvious, and the scene became a reflex test. Hide it, and failure felt arbitrary. Film only a few outcomes, and choices seemed meaningless. Film dozens of outcomes, and production costs multiplied. The CD had solved the storage problem, but designers were still learning what to do with all that space. Electronics companies pushed forward anyway. Philips launched the CDI in 1991 as a multimedia machine rather than a conventional console. Depending on the model and market, it could cost close to $1,000. It played educational software, music, reference discs, and games, but consumers struggled to understand why they needed it. Its infamous licensed Nintendo titles later made the machine a symbol of bad decisions, but its deeper problem was identity. It was too expensive for a toy, too limited for a computer, and too awkward to become the center of the living room. The 3DO arrived in the United States in 1993 with more capable hardware and an even more shocking price. $699, equivalent to well over $1,400 today. Electronic Arts founder Trip Hawkins imagined a common gaming standard manufactured by multiple electronics companies, much like VHS players. Panasonic, Gold Star, and Sanyo could build the hardware while developers created software for the shared platform. It was a clever business idea, but families did not buy standards. They bought experiences. For $699, the 3DO needed a game that instantly justified the machine's existence. Instead, much of its library looked like evidence that expensive hardware could display cleaner footage without making the underlying ideas more compelling. Better compression polished the surface, but it could not transform a shallow shooting gallery into the future. Meanwhile, Night Trap had attracted attention from Washington. During United States Senate hearings in December 1993, lawmakers presented the game as an example of violent and sexually suggestive content being marketed to children. Sega defended it. Critics often misunderstood how it played, and footage from the game became more notorious than the game itself. Night Trap was pulled from some store shelves, but the controversy increased public curiosity and helped accelerate the creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board in 1994. For years, those hearings were blamed for poisoning FMV's reputation. But controversy can sell games. Indifference cannot. The true disaster was visible in sales receipts and living rooms. Customers had paid premium prices for machines whose signature feature was often less impressive than the VHS movie beside the television. Cartridge consoles offered faster action, computers offered deeper adventures, and rented films offered clearer video. FMV hardware had entered 3 separate competitions without decisively winning any of them. But one title revealed another path. The Seventh Guest, released for computers in 1993, used full-motion video actors inside pre-rendered 3D environments. Its performances were theatrical, and its movement was limited, but the video supported the atmosphere rather than carrying the entire experience. Players explored a haunted mansion, solved puzzles, and uncovered the story piece by piece. The game became a major CD-ROM hit and helped convince consumers to buy disk drives. That distinction mattered. Recorded footage was strongest when it supplied something games struggled to create at the time: human faces, unsettling performances, and cinematic atmosphere. The Seventh Guest did not ask video to become the whole world. It used video as one ingredient inside a larger design. Real-time graphics were also improving rapidly, so FMV's visual advantage began disappearing almost as soon as it arrived. The Sony PlayStation launched in Japan in 1994 and North America in 1995. Games such as Resident Evil used filmed live-action scenes, but the main experience gave players direct control inside a 3D environment. Final Fantasy VII used cinematic sequences as rewards and transitions, but its emotional power came from dozens of hours spent actively traveling with its characters. The industry was no longer trying to make every second look like a film. Instead, developers borrowed cinema's framing, pacing, music, and spectacle while preserving the responsiveness that made games distinct. So the dedicated interactive movie machine disappeared. 2 million units, only a fraction of the Genesis user base. The 3DO was discontinued in 1996. Philips ended the CDI product line after failing to establish it as a mainstream platform. Studios closed, publishers changed direction, and store shelves that had once displayed photographs of actors filled with polygons instead. It looked like a clean extinction. But here is the twist those original designers never got to see. FMV did not die. It retreated until designers understood how to turn its limitations into mechanics. Her story made video clips part of a detective database, so searching names, interpreting expressions, and noticing contradictions became the gameplay. Telling lies expanded that concept across private conversations. Immortality used filmed performances as fragments of a mystery, allowing players to move through footage by visual association and uncover secrets hidden inside repeated gestures, props, and glances. These games did not promise unlimited control over recorded actors. They asked players to investigate performances that had already happened. Suddenly, fixed footage was not a defect, it was evidence. Even Dragon's Lair's basic language survived. QuickTime events appeared in major action games. Branching narratives became central to titles from Telltale and Quantic Dream. Black Mirror, Bandersnatch brought interactive film to Netflix, where viewers made choices using the same television remote that once seemed destined to control Hollywood itself. That closes the loop left by Night Trap. The game survived its cancelled VHS console, escaped 6 years in storage, triggered a Senate controversy, helped reshape age ratings, and became a symbol of a genre that supposedly vanished. But its descendants are still asking the same question. How much control does a story need before it belongs to the player? The fatal mistake was never cheap sets, compressed video, or actors staring slightly past the camera. It was assuming that technical spectacle could substitute for meaningful decisions. More footage looked like progress because it was measurable. More megabytes, more actors, more scenes. But immersion was never hiding inside the disc. It came from making the player's attention, judgment, or action matter. Yet there is something touching about those flickering faces. Behind every muddy frame was a sincere attempt to build a future before the technology, the audience, or even the designers fully understood what that future required. Perhaps failed consoles never truly vanish. They leave unfinished dreams for better games to inherit. Would you have wanted interactive movies to replace traditional games? Or was their collapse inevitable? Share your answer, and stay with us for more stories about the strange machines that tried to invent the future.